Good afternoon to everyone. So first, I would like to thank you actually for joining us because we are meeting just before Christmas holidays. And as you can see right now, my Christmas mood is already there. And I hope that your Christmas mood is also already there. So you can see from my festive headwear that we come in full Christmas spirit and in full Christmas mood. We do not promise gifts, unfortunately, but what we can promise to you is that our discussion is going to be strictly non-fiction. And actually, what was our idea is to have this event before Christmas holidays, because we thought that this is a very good moment to pause and take stock. And today's discussion is about CBAM for electricity, and we will today unpack actually what is already under the tree. And indeed, like Jan mentioned, Commission took care of us, thought about us, and prepared some nicely packed new implementing acts and delegated acts that actually were published, I think, yesterday, less than 24 hours. So we were quite busy the last 24 hours to make sure that we unpack them in a proper way and deliver to you. We will check what is still on the wish list, so to say, of the market. And finally, what 2026 is expected to bring us all and how we can be ready. And we may even come up with some ideas maybe for your new year resolutions. So it's going to be quite a useful webinar. This is what we can promise. CBAM is new and evolving regulation, as you can see from the recent acts. So we should be very honest from the very start that we do not yet have all the answers and all the replies. And this Santas from Commission really did their best. So we cannot guarantee perfectly wrapped gifts or immediate replies to your questions. But what we can promise is that we will collect all your questions, and we strongly encourage you to write your questions in the chat and to add them. And we want this discussion to be live. We want to hear you. We want to know your opinion, your problems. This is going to be an open discussion. We will collect and we will do our best to reflect on these questions after the webinar and maybe reply to them afterwards. So it's not that we can promise that all the replies will be there, but we will do our best. So our goal today is to share what we know and to discuss with you what you know, and then maybe to come to some interesting ideas and also to see what are the uncertainties and how we can address them. Let me remind you, the last thing from my side is to remind you that this session will be recorded. So in case that you will need to rewatch it, we will share it afterwards, of course. So in case that you will need to rewatch it or maybe share with your colleagues, we, of course, will share with you the recording. With that, so I think that now we may start the webinar itself. So usually before Christmas, we pause, we take a look back, and we check, like, how did we come to that exactly point? Why, how, what were the steps? So this is exactly what we are going to do right now. And we're going to check where we stand today with CBAM regulations. And this is where I give floor to my colleague, to senior consultant of Corregio Consulting and our sustainability expert, to Lucian, who will present this topic to you. Lucian, the floor is yours. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Insa. I will jump right in. We'll start with, not with opening the presents, that will be for later. We will start with discussing what we already know for sure, what has been in the regulation for 2 years. And also, when we get to it, we will open the presents and what the Commission has published 2 days ago, which, as my colleague Insa mentioned, is actually not final, are just proposals for modifications. So actually what we will be discussing is just what the Commission is planning to adopt, is not legislation in force yet. So let's start. Just to make the introductions for those of you who are maybe not as familiar exactly with the CBAM. So what is CBAM? It's, of course, an instrument designed to prevent carbon leakage. That's why we have the smokestacks. So it ensures, that's why it's called adjustment at the border, that the price of carbon for all the imports into the EU is adjusted to the level of the EU ETS, the EU emissions trading system. And of course, this is not a tariff as such, but it's a carbon fee that applies to EU importers. So it's EU importers that have all the obligations relating to CBAM. And of course, electricity is one of the goods covered by CBAM. It's not the only one. You may know very well that CBAM covers several other goods. It covers cement, iron and steel, aluminium, fertilizers. But of course, electricity is very unique and specific of all these commodities because it's an intangible good. It's not transported by ship, it's transported by fixed transport installations as it's described in the Union Customs Code for a very long time. And of course, that limits the countries that can export electricity to the EU, or better said, from where EU can import electricity from, to only a handful of countries that actually neighbor the EU. And of course, the webinar today will be focusing strictly on the electricity CBAM and not on the others, no matter how interesting they would be. We are an energy consultancy and we focus on the electricity CBAM, which is complicated enough. Just to discuss the main question, whether actually there is carbon leakage for electricity. Well, not really. We have delved into the Commission staff working documents and also press articles like this very good one from Bruegel, which actually looks at all the exchanges that the EU has in electricity with the neighboring states. And it actually shows that the EU is a net exporter, not a net importer. You can see here by the size of the arrows. So for instance, even Morocco is a net importer of electricity from the EU, the UK as well. The Balkans are more or less a zero-sum game. Ukraine is, of course, unfortunately, due to the war situation there, an importer, and the only country which would be a slight net exporter would be Turkey. This is also reflected in the information that was published yesterday by the European Commission. So they themselves acknowledge that there is actually no carbon leakage in terms of electricity, but still CBAM goes ahead in full as planned. So you can see here in the blue charts, these are the gross electricity exports from the EU, and in red are the gross electricity imports, and the blue bars are larger than the red bars, and therefore we have a net electricity export of the EU to its neighboring countries, not a net electricity import. The only year which was an outlier was the year 2022, when due to the energy crisis, there was the situation that the EU was a net energy importer, but overall the EU is a net exporter, so there is no carbon leakage as such. The Commission shows even more with details for each country what these quantities are, and wherever you see a minus, that's of course an export from the EU, not an import. But nonetheless, CBAM is here, it's not going away, it's applying for sure, and we have to work with it. You may have also heard the terms free allowances, and actually we have received a lot of questions whether there is a gradual phased-in approach for CBAM for electricity. Of course not, because free allowances at the moment in the EU are only applicable to industrial installations. So only industrial installations like steel, cement, fertilizer facilities are still eligible to receive free allowances, whereas electricity producers in the EU have not received free allowances for a very long time. And therefore, there is no phased-in approach for electricity for CBAM, as it is for the other commodities. So as you can see here, this is the chart with the phased-in approach for the other commodities. So we have a gradual phase-in of the CBAM and a gradual phase-out of the free allowances for the industrial sectors. But of course, this does not apply for electricity. So just to clear this out from the very beginning, in case we get questions on this, there is no phase-in. Electricity will be hit by CBAM in full, so with 100% effect as of 1st of January 2026. Of course, with the caveat, that's something that comes from the fact that CBAM and the EU ETS are two sides of the same coin. That's why we have the euro coin there, because it's the same thing at the end of the day. So the exception is that, of course, if you pay carbon price for the electricity that you import in the country of origin, so for instance, in Serbia, which is working to introduce carbon pricing, as our colleague will explain later on, or Turkey, which is working to do the same, or the UK, which already has a carbon price, that will be deducted from the CBAM cost that you have to pay for the electricity importation into the EU. And that stems from the very nature of CBAM and the EU ETS being two sides of the same coin. CBAM is not new. We've had it for 2 years already, the regulation in force, and we had this transitional period. Some of you may be very familiar with it. Others may not be very familiar, but actually there were obligations under CBAM already. They were just not financial obligations as such. But during the transitional period, reports had to be submitted. Market participants from some member states actually submitted quite a lot of reports. I've seen in the documents from the Commission that market participants from Italy, from Romania, really did submit a lot of information to the Commission as requested. But the transitional period is over, and the clock is ticking. 1st of January is right around the corner, and we are about to enter the definitive period. And what does the definitive period mean? It means that all electricity imports that will come into the EU from the 1st of January 2026 will be hit by CBAM, will be subject to CBAM. It doesn't mean that you have to pay immediately. So the first declarations for these imports are only to be submitted in 2027. And similarly, payments for imports of electricity into the EU in 2026 as well only have to be provided in 2026. So there is a special rule for the year 2026 that there is no obligation to surrender CBAM certificates quarterly. And also the rules on pricing of the CBAM certificates is slightly different for 2026, as it's the first year of application, and my colleagues will talk more about this later, so we'll jump to the next stage. In terms of registration for as CBAM declarant, this is something that, again, electricity is slightly different from the other commodities, whereas for cement or for steel, which of course come from all over the world, via completely different import routes into the EU. They can come by ship, by truck, by train. Electricity, it can only come by physical lines into the EU, and therefore the rules on registering as a CBAM declarant are somewhat different. There is this Commission implementing regulation which was actually adopted earlier this year, and it was amended with this package that was just published, but this did not change the fact that importers of electricity are regarded as CBAM declarants without the need to submit an application for it to register as such, because you are automatically a CBAM declarant if you have operations of import or export of electricity at the borders with the European Union, because the TSOs will submit the monthly reports to the customs authority, and the customs authority will know exactly what you have traded. So there is no getting away from this. There's a special rule for electricity compared to the other commodities. Again, in terms of what you actually need to do, so you have to submit these CBAM reports, which have to contain the customs declaration. The customs declaration is a must for every activity that you do regarding CBAM. Your other customs related information, so name, address, and URI number is of course critical for any CBAM declaration, and also the quantities of electricity that you have imported into the EU, which is the only thing that's actually relevant. It's not really relevant if you have exported any electricity into the EU. And of course, with regards to the submission of these CBAM declarations, there's possibility to use third parties like customs brokers to help you with these, because it's quite complex process, and actually the rules are not finalized. So many of the documents that the Commission published recently actually change a lot of the rules in terms of the CBAM declarations and the template. So what we are presenting here is just the idea and the main points, but the specifics actually still need to be fine-tuned. So of course, the main thing that you need to specify is the source of electricity. That's with customs as well, and customs and CBAM go hand in hand. You need to specify this. And there are other provisions in the CBAM regulation itself that mention what the CBAM regulation needs to contain. So the quantity of electricity and so on and so forth. And if, of course, you pay any carbon cost in the countries of origin where you import the electricity from, that would need to be specified as well. There are not many countries that actually qualify for this, except for the UK at the moment, but hopefully Serbia will join the bandwagon next year as well. Another question that we have had a lot over the past year is actually if GOs can be used to prove that the electricity imported from outside the EU is green electricity and therefore would be exempt from the obligation to pay the CBAM. Because of course, if the electricity is clean, then it has no net effect on the EU market and you could bring it into the EU. But unfortunately, and this should be, I would like to stress this point, GOs cannot be used to this point. So they play absolutely no role for CBAM, and they cannot, under any circumstances, be used for CBAM purposes or exemptions. You can just ignore that GOs exist. And this is a pity because a lot of work has been done, for instance, between the EU and energy community to try to ensure in the future mutual recognition of GOs. But as mentioned, for the moment, GOs play absolutely no role for CBAM, so they are virtually useless. And the only thing that you can actually use for CBAM exemption is the PPA exemption in Section 5 of Annex 4, which my colleagues will discuss a bit later, which has seen a lot of big changes, and those are the gifts that we're getting to. Not yet. Another question that we have seen a lot over the last years is about transit and whether transit would be exempted from CBAM. And the short answer is yes, of course. Electricity has to be exempted from CBAM because this is what the Union Customs Code provides. There is an exemption for transit of all sorts, not only transit of electricity. So it's something that needs to be performed or has to be performed. So the difference is that there can be transit flows from the EU to other EU member states via non-EU member states, or from non-EU member states to other non-EU member states via EU member states. It doesn't matter. All of these have to be exempted under CBAM, and there is no ground for CBAM application for transit flows. Of course, I said this is the short answer because the long answer is a bit more complicated. In practice, transit is not so easy to deal with. Luckily, electricity is very transparent. So a lot of the information you can see, actually all the information about electricity transactions you can find on the websites of NSOE, and of course in the monthly transmission reports that are prepared by the TSOs. So they explain and they show you exactly what kind of electricity has been exported or imported or transited, and these form the basis for applying for transit exemption. The answers differ from country to country. The practice is not uniform. Bulgaria has its own way of working, Romania has its own way of working, Moldova the same, or other countries have their own specificities regarding how to accommodate transit regime. But in terms of the legislation, transit should be exempted from CBAM. There should be no grounds to impose a CBAM charge on purely transit flows. Of course, if there is an import into the EU, there is no question about that. And getting close to the end of my presentation to pass on to my colleagues, another question would be, is netting possible? So for instance, I have a small contract to import into the EU from outside the EU. And in the meantime, I export a lot of electricity from the EU to the non-EU member state. No, of course not. It doesn't matter. Even if you import 1 megawatt of electricity, you would need to pay the CBAM cost for that 1 megawatt. It doesn't matter that you export 1 million megawatts. And this follows again from customs legislation, because you need to file customs declaration for imports and you need to file customs declaration for exports. And there is no netting between the two. Everything that you import into the EU is subject to CBAM for electricity in full, and you have to deal with everything that we will discuss later on. Now we get to the gifts, to the Christmas package first of all, we have the proposal for the modification of the CBAM regulation, which has been modified again this year through the omnibus package. But we have another proposal for modification here, which of course is not yet enforced. It's just a proposal. So it has been tabled. It's in the public domain now. We can read it. We can learn about it. But this is by no means the final version. So it will have to go through the legislative process for formal approval. And so are the other many packages, many Christmas gifts of delegated acts and implementing acts which have been adopted. Some have relevance for electricity or touch upon electricity. Others are more relevant for the other commodities. But of course, CBAM is a unitary package of legislation. So everything has been essentially dropped on us as a Christmas gift, I presume, by the Commission to try to chew on. We were expecting other things, or at least some exemptions, and it was in the public domain also that Poland requested exemption, for instance, for flows with Ukraine. Just a quick answer about this. Do we have exemptions? Well, yes and no. So technically, there is no exemption for Ukraine as such, even though it's fighting a war. So CBAM will apply to Ukraine for both for all the commodities, including for electricity. However, there is a provision, and this is very important, that for TSO flows or for emergency electricity assistance or unscheduled flows, such as through inter-TSO compensation mechanism or FSCAR, will not be subject to CBAM. So this is something that we can already cross off the list because it has been exempted. Another question, and this is the last one, is about the energy community states, which of course are working towards joining the EU and joining the EU energy market. So we should try to, EU should try to integrate them. The conditions initially imposed for the exemption for market coupling were very harsh and have not been essentially complied by any of the energy community member states. So none of them have received any exemption. But the modifications provide a very interesting proposition for the EU to enter into an MOU, into a memorandum of understanding with the energy community countries and with the energy community secretariat to work towards applying the exemption for market coupling before the market coupling is actually performed. So it would be like a diplomatic exemption from CBAM for the energy community member states. But of course, the details on this are extremely scarce. This has just been dropped as a possibility in the proposal for the change of regulation. It's something that we can't know much more of, and we'll have to see. And in any case, 1st of January is right around the corner, so CBAM will likely apply in full as of 1st of January. And any possible exemptions, for instance, for energy community countries, would come, but only at a later stage in time. Or there could be discussions about applying with retroactive effect, but that's of course controversial. So I'll pass the floor back to Insa. We have the Christmas tree with all the packages, with all the gifts nicely around it. You can barely see the tree because of all the gifts, but this is what this year looks like. So thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Lucian. So thanks for walking us through the fundamentals of CBAM. That was a very that was a perfect, actually, reminder of both logic and mechanics of CBAM. And it seems like you told us that the Commission didn't want to leave some unfinished tasks on the desk before 2026. That's also kind of tradition that at the Christmas we try to wrap up everything to finish all the tasks. So that's exactly what the Commission did. We have seen indeed this number of proposals and gifts, but it's interesting to understand if the Commission actually succeed in making the implementation of CBAM more concrete and operational. And I hope that our next speaker, Federica Barbieri, independent consultant and specialist and industry expert in the sector of electricity and carbon, will help us to understand if actually implementation of CBAM was made by Commission easier and more simple. Federica, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Insa, and also thank you, Lucian. You said almost everything, Lucian. So we really need to go more into details now after your presentation. But I think you set the stage very well, and I would like maybe to focus on the key points that I believe are still, let's say, subject to discussion. And also, of course, thank you for the invitation. And was just checking the participant list, and I see many colleagues that joined today's, and I think we are all on the same boat. Like we're all struggling to read, rushing to read these 24 documents that were being published yesterday by the Commission. They have been wrapped, but to a certain extent, because most of the documents have a watermark, which with an official version are still to be published. Because of course they need to go through the legislator, and they will of course soon be published on the official platform. Maybe just to clarify for those that, since it all came in a package yesterday following the press conference of the Commissioner Sejourné and Hoekstra, but it's good to distinguish the document, I would say, in four different boxes. And actually, if I can share, I think a picture in the chat. So this is what you can see. It's an overview of what had been delivered yesterday by the Commission. Also, this was published on LinkedIn, so it's publicly available. And you can see that there are four main boxes. So the first one is the CBAM review report. The second one is the adoption of the CBAM secondary acts. The third one is the strengthening the CBAM regulation, so basically the amendment proposal. And the fourth one is the temporary decarbonization fund. So you see that these boxes seems to be separated, but in reality they're all interconnected. Why? Because there is an interesting, let's say, condition, statement in the amendment proposal, which Lucian mentioned, which is the retroactive application. So the retroactive application means that the new electricity rules, the one that are established in the CBAM amendment proposal, if approved, because of course they have to go through the co-legislative process, which might last, let's say, on average is 16 months. This will be retroactively applied as of 1st of January 2026. So it's subject to the European Parliament and the Council. Of course, there are possible amendments that can be done during the legislative process. There are legal and practical concerns over this retroactive effect. But overall, I mean, I think we as the electricity industry, we can welcome, let's say, these improvements. And let's say, three main improvements I can see are the first one on the default values. If you're familiar with CBAM application, basically default values are a sort of a reference for other commodities. And it's basically, if you don't use actual values, then the default values are used by standard. And the way the default values were established under the electricity imports, it was based on CO2 emission factor. The CO2 emission factor basically takes only the fossil fuel emission generators. So let's take a case of a country that has imaginary country that has 50% gas and 50% renewables, then and you are exporting electricity from that third country, then in practice, CBAM will consider all the electricity as from fossil fuels. Of course, this has raised concern because the actual emissions would have been of the electricity mix would have been overestimated, and in that sense, the Commission made a positive step forward and changed the default emission factor to the average grid emission factor, so including renewable and non-fossil sources, also nuclear as well. What we can read also from recital 46 of the amendment proposal, as of now, what you have seen the tables of the default values, which are still based on the CO2 emission factor, are still based on the previously approved regulation. So what we can read, but we still don't know, what we can read from the text is that the Commission, of course, needs to recalculate and publish the new default values for imported electricity based on the revised grid average approach. And it will still be based on IEA data, International Energy Agency data, and it will still be based on a 5 years average. So this is the first improvements as the default values are concerned. Then when it comes to actual values, you know that there are five cumulative conditions that need to be fulfilled in order to apply actual values, so from the specific plant. And one of the, let's say, most debated condition was the no physical congestion criteria. I think for many months there's been debated what do we mean by physical congestion, and that was the first let's say, question mark. It was clarified during the public consultation in August what was meant by physical congestion, but still one of the challenge of CBAM, of course, is the let's say the gap between the intention of the policy and the practical application of the policy. And on the no congestion criteria, one of the main issues was the absence of data, or simply the transmission system operators were not sharing data with market participants, with importers on the occurrence of congestions, and also congestion is something that cannot be foreseen by importers. And also the congestion criteria was quite broad because it stated that there cannot be any congestion in the grid between the production point and the interconnection. So this has been removed and also will apply retroactively. And also the alternative requirement of proving a direct physical connection to the EU grid has also been removed. So this is the first improvement that we can see from the amending regulation. Another, we can call it improvement, depending on where you are in the sector, but it clarifies a bit of the role of the TSOs. And it's clear that the TSOs, electricity flows from third countries from action that TSOs take to ensure the safe and secure operation of their networks. So handling emergency and scheduled flows, including all the actions are not subject to this regulation. And these are the main changes. There's been also a change of PPA, but I'll leave it to my next colleague. And also there has been a quite, let's say, obvious clarification on the implicit allocation. I mean, of course, for those that are in the sector, it's quite obvious, but the Commission specified that in case foreign capacity nomination is no longer required when capacity is allocated implicitly, because you are well aware that when capacity is allocated implicitly, you cannot really associate a certain capacity to a specific importer. Of course, there is still the open question, how does CBAM applies between a non-EU country and EU country where a capacity is allocated implicitly. But I will leave it also for the next colleagues. And maybe to conclude, I would like to use a metaphor. I've always said that CBAM is a big stick and an unclear carrot. This stick now has become a bit smaller. So this for sure is something we can improve. The carrot is starting to appear, but it's still a bit transparent. We still have unclarity on what volumes needs to be reported, and also and this is closely linked to the treatment of transit. This is something that we hope the Commission will clarify as soon as possible. But overall, we can say that CBAM is 85–90% complete. But for the percentage, I'll leave the feedback to my colleagues. What do they think? And maybe to conclude, sorry, I forgot another thing. it's less. It's 75, 80%, because there are still 2 implementing acts to be approved. One is on the carbon price paid in third country, and the other one, if I haven't missed it, is the condition for sale and repurchase of CBAM certificates. And for the carbon price paid in a third country, maybe one correction from the previous slide. If you read the report, then you can see in the UK section, you can see an implicit recognition of the UK carbon price support scheme. So basically saying if the UK ETS plus the carbon price support scheme, which is a tax of £18 per ton of CO2, is more than the EU ETS price, then CBAM, there should be no CBAM liability to electricity importers. So these are the 2 things that are still missing, 75, 80% of clarity. And I hope I gave more answers than questions, but I'm sure my colleagues will follow up with a more detailed explanation on the remaining points. Max, back to you.
Federico,
Yes,
I have to
Max,
say you're
please.
getting very popular. Many questions directly addressed to you. So quick note to everyone who has asked a question. If you can head over to the Q&A section and upvote the ones you find the most interesting, we will address them in bulk. And Federico will be there to answer the ones directly addressed to him as well.
Yes. So Federica, thanks a lot. Indeed, you see that our audience is very much interested in this topic. And if CBAM defined the rules, I would say that PPAs, the ones that mentioned by you, are the promises that we sign. And as we all know, that promises, especially those ones made at Christmas time, tend to be remembered. So let's switch to this topic of PPA and how they interact with CBAM regulations, especially with the new ones, ideas that Commission came up with. And this is where my colleague Kutamish may help us with this, our senior associate at Corregio Consulting, and also a specialist in this topic. So the floor is yours. Please let us know what you think in terms of PPA, how they play with new CBAM regulations.
Thank you so much, Inza. So first of all, you said this is a Christmas present. It is indeed, because this is the part where all actually the industry players are looking for to reduce their CBAM cost. So this is one of the major items in CBAM that you can rely on, reduce your CBAM cost. And this is why this PPA exemption is quite crucial to understand and take a position in the market to rely more on exporting to EU. So I have one short slide for you to explain the current status quo. I hope it's visible now. So
Not
first
yet.
of all, not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
Still loading, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So before jumping into what has been changed, I would like to first explain what was the status quo in the before this proposal. So firstly, what we seen as a condition was there should be one PPA between the CBAM declarant and the producer. That was quite.
Thomas, may I ask you to reshare your slides? Because it's black for me, so I wonder if it's black for other people.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We will need to. No webinar may go without technical problems, you know. That's a
This
tradition.
is the secret gift.
Yes, that's a tradition.
Is it okay now?
Not yet. Again, it's just black screen.
Maybe I can try to share it.
Let's do that.
That would be nice.
Okay.
Third time, right?
Yeah, I'll share it.
Oh, yes.
There we are. It works.
Right.
Thank you. Yes.
So
now
good.
You're the king.
So as a first condition before this recent proposal, there was an option to have a PPA between the CBAM declarant and the producer. So they will be able to rely on this PPA and apply the actual embedded emission for the imported electricity. What does this mean? So you basically, if you are importing a renewable electricity from the third country, you will be able to rely on this electricity and say that you are not creating emissions, and instead you are reducing your CBAM cost, because simply it is a renewable electricity. But there were 5 cumulative criteria to prove this. And these criteria were quite strict, but now we have more realist, more pragmatic approach when it comes to PPAs. So, and the second condition was this direct connection with EU grid. So either that facility installation should have connected to EU grid, there should be a direct connection, or there should be a proof of no physical network connection. So the idea was also here electrons are moving, and those renewable electrons should be able to transmit into the European grid system. And because of this, there should be no physical network congestion and hourly base. But simply, this was also received major critics in Brussels, and the DG tax people also were being criticized about this by many stakeholders, and this has also changed. And also the other criteria, the third criteria was the installation. The installation should emit less than 550 grams CO2 of fossil fuel origin per kilowatt hours. That was the other condition. And the other one is the fourth one is the firm nomination of the allocation capacity. These should also be cleared by the TSOs and from an hour-based approach. And this was also another one. And the fifth one is the fulfillment of all criteria should be certified by an aggregated verifier. So the verifier should be able to check your installments and see that, okay, this is a renewable electricity produced and transformed into the European grid system. But what has changed is, as I said, it's now more realistic approach. Now, first of all, these PPAs are not only between the CBAM declarant or importer and the producer, but it is also an option for intermediaries who can also join these PPA agreements. And what does this mean is there should be one single contract framework covering all 3 parties. So this means CBAM declarant or importer, intermediary, and the electricity producer. So Commission now, with these proposals, if approved like this, they are accepting this type of PPA frameworks. What does this mean in reality? It means that like BRPs, aggregators, they can be also use their PPAs in this context. So they can be directly part of this PPA contractual relationship. That's what's foreseen. And the major one is where the realistic approach comes is this proof of no physical network connection. If this approach, so there will be no physical checks if there will be any congestion at the border anytime. So this has been completely removed, simply relying on that the electrons are flowing physically, but what we are focusing on here is simply the nominations, and therefore there is no need to check the network congestion. So this is completely removed in this proposal, and it's quite promising because this was one of the major problems and hurdles when it comes to proving that you can renewable back PPAs that you can use and reduce your CBAM cost. And this physical network congestion was very likely for certain cases at the border, and now it has been completely removed. And when it comes to installations, yes, it stays as it is, and now still it is. You should not emit more than 550 grams CO2 of fossil fuel origin per kilowatt hour, and this means that the major renewable facilities will be accepted. So you cannot import simply the coal electricity. This threshold puts a limit on this. And when it comes to the other cumulative factor, the requirement to demonstrate the firm nomination, So there is also one slight adjustment related to this, and now it only applies to explicit capacity borders. So for implicit capacity borders, there is now one exemption. So obviously that should be so, because this is where explicit capacity borders plays a role here, and there is a slight adjustments in this context. And when it comes to this aggregated verifiers, there will be also a list of verifiers that will be accessible, and that should be, these verifiers should check the installments, and they should be able to check if this production is, as promised, renewable. This is also showing this emission reduction targets should be respected, not only by relying on the contracts, but also on the real world. There will be a potential aggregation process as well. So this is what has been promised by the Commission, but as my colleague said, we still don't know to what extent this will be fully approved. There could be some changes on the way. But this shows us the intent is more realistic. The intent of the EU Commission is, if you produce renewable electricity, if you have renewable electricity in your portfolio as an exporter, you will be able to export this to your importer, and by relying on your PPA, you can simply reduce your CBAM cost, because this gives you a way to apply the actual embedded emissions. And by this way, you can also reach your emission targets. So this was one of the ways to reduce your CBAM cost. And obviously, as my colleagues has discussed, the other way is this price paid in the third country for carbon. So looking at the example of Turkey, for example, as of next month, Turkey will be launching its own emission trading system, starting with this pilot phase. There will be also still more clarification in this regard. But if you pay a carbon price in principle in the third country, you will be able to deduct that amount from the CBAM cost, which is reflected to importers. So this will be also something that could be provided more clarification in the couple of next months as well. Simply, we don't know to which criteria we should rely on, but this will be conditional. Obviously, this will be negotiated, and depends on also high-level negotiations when it comes to understand the carbon price signals in different countries. So I can pass the floor to Insa back again. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Kutamish. Thanks for this. And we should not forget that actually CBAM is not about the EU level, but CBAM is also about the national level. And to me, it seems that for many countries, for many non-EU countries, CBAM is like being invited to Christmas dinner, to be invited at the EU table, but only if you follow certain house rules. And it's not always easy to follow these rules. So now we are going to look into this question closely and to unpack it in details. And this is where our independent consultant and industry expert Miloš will help us with this, explaining us if Serbia is actually dressed up for dinner or not. Miloš, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Isa, very much for the introduction. Well, if you are ready for EU table, you could see my T-shirt. It's a black, so I already answered your question in a way. Thanks, Kultamis, to mention Turkey. I will just say that in Serbia, we think for years about that, how to join the table and not to be really damaged, like how to stay there, but how to sit on a table. Like it's really hard to do so, but we are managing in a way. First thing, yes, we also adopted like a CBAM tax law recently, a couple of weeks ago, but it's not still smooth to be implemented, let's say. Why? We're missing a bylaws. In that law, we say really nice how we'll calculate the emissions, the verified emissions minus these referent emissions for a sector, and multiply with €4 per ton of emissions. but still reference values we're missing. We don't know what will be the bylaw. Then what we are missing there, we are missing the, let's say, the calculation for a tax credit for electricity, because we have exemption from electricity. When we say in Serbia, yes, if there is a company, electricity company producing, and the role of the company is producing electricity more than 80% of their activities, they could be, let's say, exempted as a tax credit 20% of the CBAM tax for of the total percentage they invest in decarbonization. Wow, nicely put it, but still, we don't know anything about that. We don't know what measures of decarbonization are eligible, how that shall be calculated. We expected the bylaw. So what happened on the 17th of December, this year, let's say, to the EU, the same is happening in Serbia. We are still like expecting the things to happen, to be ready to predict something and to say to the clients what they could expect and how they could plan the next year, which is actually questions about the old questions. So you guys, I suppose, who are listening, that like now you are thinking, oh, how could we put that? What's the best way to put it on a table? Also, in case of Serbia, in that law, we have something interesting, which is, let's say, it said that from the state budget, that kind of companies could have some grants, some subsidies for the decarbonization. So for me, it could be really interesting if they are paying a tax, and then from the budget, they get having the same money for decarbonization like attempts and the way they're struggling, which I don't think is the idea. The one interesting question for us, I could say EU member states are also waiting for CBAM, but for us, let's say we are kind of double discriminating that way, because first we need to see clearly what we need to adapt with. We still don't have it on the table. And then they need to, let's say, the European Commission, that what we provided in our third countries, in Serbia, is enough as a deduction from CBAM tax one day. So the complex picture, but let's say in a let's say recent period, we will have some answers on that. Lucian mentioned that possibility that Serbia is energy community contracting parties could have the memoranda with the European Commission. But then also, what will be in that memoranda? Shall we wait for memoranda and then do everything, or start to prepare? In what way to prepare? These are all the questions. Serbia, from the Western Balkan countries, is, let's say, the more ready for ETS, which is another part of the coin of CBAM. For example, Bosnia and Herzegovina are on zero implementation of this monitoring, reporting, and accreditation verification of ETS. Montenegro is some half on a way. I think it's not a good idea what they did, because they partly implemented it, and if you partly implement it and expect from European Commission to say, one day your I don't know CBAM tax is okay to be deducted from the what you are paying when you're importing to EU, I don't think it's a good idea. They will, I suppose, ask for full implementation of all EU documents and acts. Okay, in Serbia we say up until 2030 the tax will be higher. It will be 40 euro per ton and 80 euro per ton as it is in EU. It will be like 2014. That's the plan up until now. So we actually put everything on a scene. As for the EU ETS, yes, we're kind of ready, but still we are missing that cap and trade thing. It's good to have everything like formally settled and to calculate emissions and to verify it. But if you don't have the market and if you're not doing auctions, what we are actually doing then? We were thinking before joining in EU, which I think will be soon for all the Western Balkan countries, to implement something which is called, let's say, the regional ETS. That was in a plan, like we talk about that in the ministry, but the problem with that, as I said, is a different level of implementation of different states. Like if you have one state on that level of implementation of EU acts and some other didn't do so, how could we trade the same, let's say, on that regional ETS market? And then we could have the local one. But then what's the point if we have this tax? So there are a lot of, as I presented, the questions which we are raising every day locally, and looking into EU and asking and looking from them, like and expecting something which we could rely on so that we could plan our things. Lucian also mentioned the customs, the transit and everything. I now saw the one interesting question: if you want to import from non-EU country to non-EU country and transit it to the EU country, what we could expect? Like, yes, a lot of questions all around. But what I could say that, for example, I have some clients and I'm advising them, and yes, I'm presenting them what they could expect. But we all be patient, because that you could see that things are changing day by day, and I don't think that somebody will allow everything to be, let's say, the market as we know up until the 1st January 2026 will be ruined by one night. I don't think that will happen, and I'm totally positive that we in Serbia, with this implementation, we try to follow the scene and to try to do something, not to burden actually our side of the market, of our producers and our guys here, what they did up until now. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Milos. Thanks for that. So this is actually our presentations of the topic, but we see that we really have a lot of questions from you, and thanks a lot for that, because this was the goal, to discuss not only what is ready, but also what is not ready, and where we have some uncertainties and unclarities. So Max, please help me to moderate this session of Q&A. I see that there is a lot of questions, so let's start replying at least to the ones where we already have some replies. Our experts will help us with that, of course.
Thank you very much, Insa. Yeah, thank you to all of you who have submitted questions both in the chat and the Q&A section. So if you haven't already gone over there to upvote some that are also relevant for you, please do so right now. And we'll get started with the filtering. So, Lucian, I believe the first question is good for you. If we engage in transit energy trade with the countries listed as non-EU, EU, and then non-EU again, are we exempt from CBAM? And do we need to obtain the transit report from the TSO? Floor is yours.
Okay, that's an excellent question. And actually, there are many questions on transit. So we'll try to break this down piece by piece, because it's a major topic and it's a complex one. So in principle, transit should be exempted no matter which way it's going. So if it's non-EU through EU to another non-EU state, it doesn't matter, or the other way around, EU to non-EU to EU, it should be exempted, and this would be under customs rules. Now, a key element of this is the TSO reports, and I've seen in the comments somewhere mentioning whether TSOs are actually ready to prepare the reports to actually showcase transit separately. And this is where actually, the devil lies in the details, even if the customs legislation allows for this. And of course, transit should be exempted. The practice of the TSOs is very different in terms of how they actually prepare these monthly reports, which would be necessary to prove that the electricity was transited and not imported in the EU, and therefore subject to CBAM. So we have completely different practices between regional TSOs. We have some TSOs which do everything by themselves. And one example I can think of is Moldelectrica in Moldova. They take care of everything. They go to customs, they say this is transit, problem solved. There should be no CBAM because they take care of everything. Other TSOs, they provide, like the Romanian TSO, for instance, they provide a very nice report where it actually shows transit flows, from which border to which border, what's imported, what's exported, and what's transited. And therefore, you have a very clear and easy map, which you can provide to the customs authority, and then later on to the CBAM, to the CBAM reporting, to prove that the electricity was transited and not have any issues with that. And then there are other TSOs which don't really have this approach, where it's a bit uncertain how they treat transit. So it very much depends from country to country. And unfortunately, there is still no one-size-fits-all solution to this. It's still a patchwork of different systems that need to be accommodated. And herein lies the difficulty. And even though we already had a lot of questions on transit, we can have even more questions if we start going and looking at each of the countries specifically. So this is actually an issue which has still not been resolved in full, even though as per the Union Customs Code, customs should be, transit should be allowed, and therefore there should be no CBAM imposition for such transit flows. Federico, if you want to add something to this, maybe clarifications, maybe I missed something.
No, it's all good. I think it's still about the theory, the theory and the practice. So in theory, yeah, it should be exempted. In practice, still, I mean, we didn't have like a clear answer. We don't have, at least from the reading of the document, and also the CBAM registry, the CBAM platform will need to be adapted to allow for the demonstration of such transit. And so that's something that is more from the IT point of view. But yeah, and as Lucian mentioned, there is a lot of divergences among TSO reports. And therefore, due to this lack of harmonization, of course, it would not, I would say, be wise to suggest that TSO's reports should be the one used for CBAM compliance, even though at the moment my understanding is that they are what the TSO reports are used, the monthly one are used for custom declaration. But as Lucian mentioned, there needs to be a match between custom and CBAM. But CBAM goes on hourly level, while customs on a monthly resolution. So there is this divergence. And at the moment, what we know that all market parties or importers still have data at hourly level, but still we still miss for a clear answer from the Commission what reports are accepted and what kind of verification process is needed. And yeah, unfortunately, this is a question that we don't have. We would like to have an answer to, but still we don't have.
Thomas, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add, in the context of PPA, I also see a question about how this will be required to agree with producers and hourly documentation. So it's also saying we should not forget about there are 5 cumulative criteria for PPA to be accepted for relying on the actual embedded emission. So there will be a need for a firmly nominated position at the allocated interconnection capacity. And there should be the production should be also not longer than 1 hour. So a mechanism that's needed in the context of reporting is this hourly matching. So this is again the question of TSOs, to what extent they will cooperate, how they will provide this information. Let's just give you an example. Let's say a solar panel producing electricity, renewable electricity in Turkey produced this, but at the same time, if there is like a monthly auction capacity, they reserve that, they bid and they get that auction and reserve the position with an attractive price at the border. To what extent, for example, either Turkish TSO or the Bulgarian TSO, let's say, will be able to provide this hourly matching data, and in terms of reporting for CBAM declarant, what type of documents they should provide is still something that needs to be clarified. So these details will be also answered once I think everything is adopted officially. Then we will see the specific segments in the CBAM registry as well, to what extent which documents will be accepted for you to claim that you have renewable-backed PPA. But in principle, the approach is you should be able to prove this in an easier way. But TSOs who are providing all this information and data, to what extent they will cooperate is also a question mark. And
thank you, Kotamish. So let's switch to the next question. And I think Yeah, there was one more question about PPA, Kutamish, if you don't mind, about the specific format of the PPAs. Is there a specific format that the European Commission expects for the PPA?
Currently, there are some formats available. You can also see that CBAM compliant PPAs, but these are basically we should rely on the definition the legislation. It simply says that power purchase agreement is an agreement where the producer and now also with the intermediaries and the importers are agree on for physical delivery of the electricity. So this PPA should definitely foresee a physical delivery. This is not a financial product. This is a physical product, and this is a contract. So these are the major principles for PPAs. So we don't have any very specific templates just provided by European Commissions, but this is a contract for private sector. But the major PPAs already available should be able to provide what is needed.
Thanks, Kutamish. And there is a good one, and I think this is a question to all of our experts, including Jan maybe also. Do you think it is fair to announce this Christmas package after the yearly capacity auctions for some borders? So, dear experts, do you think it is fair?
Well, the idea of but the problem with CBAM is not its intention or its ambition to avoid carbon leakage, but it's about which creates like an uncertainty. What our traders or the exporters or importers need is just a reliable price signal. They just need to find a price to bid. And it's also not about the profit itself as well. The margin could be also less because they have already a position and they would like to keep that position. And the problem here is they are just attending a game, then they don't know the rule book. It might change immediately, and they cannot find any price to bid. So this is the problem. So from that point, I agree with that comment, to be honest. So
do you think, Jan?
Yeah.
To fair or not fair, this whole, regulation doesn't fit very well to the functioning of the electricity market. This is just a factum. It works well with commodities like aluminium or construction material. There you have one point of import, and then you have, let's say, a carbon content that needs to be ascertained, and that's it. The electricity is a much more fungible commodity. It travels very fast across borders. And that leads to these issues that we're having here. And it's also to a limited extent only storable. So it is always unfair. The unfairness probably comes not from the point of the late publishing, but more of the not better think through of CBAM when making it applicable to the electricity sector. That the crime has not been committed now. It has been committed maybe 3-4 years ago, because then when this of CBAM was designed, and it is clear the design of the CBAM is not really in line with how the market here functions, and this is why we're having all these unclarities. I mean, what we are trying to get you to really hear this is that you have a more like a feeling what is needed for you. What do you that work in the industry need to do as of January 1st, 2026? And I think we have some more clarity now after the more recent acts that are coming out from Brussels as a Christmas present. But there is still more that we need to know. So we're not finished yet. What you need to see is that ultimately these are flying targets. CBAM is a flying target. It's not settled yet, but it starts to settle.
Maybe I can add one more thing to this, Jan, just to echo what you said. You're 100% right. Electricity is not like the other commodities. I mean, cement, usually if you have an import of cement, it's in one direction, it's easy. Or steel, you have import of steel from, I don't know, India to Europe. CBAM makes sense. But electricity is traded and can flow across the same border in different directions several times a day. So you can have imports at 1 hour and then exports in the other direction, then imports again, and then exports again. So from this point of view, applying CBAM for electricity can actually do more harm than good. And just applying CBAM to the portion of imports of electricity into the EU may actually restrict flows at the end of the day, which may have harmful consequences in terms of decarbonization rather than the positive consequences or desires that the Commission wanted to or actually the EU legislator, I should say, wanted to achieve with CBAM by including electricity as well. CBAM, not CBAM, Milos, raise your hand is up. So please, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Lucian. I just wanted to add, like, for me, CBAM for electricity coming to you from fossil fuels is okay, but under the strict rules and not like 5 days before Christmas. And that needs to be distinguished really clearly to know, for us to know how to advise the people what to do. And that's the thing. For example, I had one question, what Serbia did it, like for our people who want to import to EU, we have electricity because of the CBAM. But our local CBAM tax for somebody who wants to import to Serbia, we didn't include electricity, just the other things like aluminum, steel, etc.
Yes, Federico,
Yes,
please.
Federico.
Yeah, to me, sometimes I wish I had a time machine and go back and warn about all the problem that this legislative piece would have caused. But I think there are two. One of the words we need to reflect on is on fairness, and of course there is an objective of the policy, and then there is a practical result. We were discussing maybe together with the colleagues that CBAM is a bit like gambling. You don't really know what to get out of it, and it's a gambling where everybody is losing. And I'm stealing this. I think it was Lucian that mentioned that, and because it's indeed a policy that will have a short-term impact, and that will be negative. I mean, now with the amendments, there's been improvements, but just the uncertainty is one of the biggest enemy for electricity importers. As mentioned, we had the yearly auction already taking place, and most of the those who participate in the auction did not have a full understanding of the scenario. And then if you don't have a full understanding, how can you participate in a game when you don't know the rules of the game? And if you see also the auction prices, there have been an incredible drop, I think from 80% to 90%. And of course, you need to decouple that there are different causes for the drop, the uncertainties, the fact that there is an integrated carbon price in the electricity imports. But yeah, but still it's underestimation, probably the legislator. And now the solution is a bit a last-minute solution. It's not ideal. It still goes in the right direction, and at least from what I can see, it incentivizes the development of carbon pricing in different countries. In the Balkans, for example, it's accelerating as well the linkage talk with the UK. So there are some positives. I would say let's acknowledge the effect that CBAM has as a first, say, international policy. But of course, from the electricity point of view, it still has a lot of question marks, which would have been great to be solved yesterday. But yeah, I think it's good that we are here today. We are all on the same boat, trying to figure out what's going to happen on the 1st of January 26. And but yeah, I think it's a good start. Not the best start, but not the worst.
Thanks, Federico. I just want to say, like, I just hope we are on a ship which is not called Titanic.
Definitely not. Definitely not. It's all about Christmas. Dear experts, I think it's also good to remind everyone when the proposed amendments are to be adopted, because we see a few questions regarding that. So please remind our audience about that, about the process.
I think one of our colleagues based in Brussels, maybe Federico, or Alvin, since you are there. But for sure, this is not something that will be adopted by New Year's Eve. So it will not be a New Year's present. For sure not.
I escaped Brussels, so I avoided the farmers' protest, so I'm safe in my hometown. No, I mean, like, look, timeline is something that everybody is wondering when the new default values will be published, when the regulation will be adopted. It's gonna happen before the end of the year for sure. I mean, for those that are foreseen before the end of the year, for the default values publication, I expect them to publish it on the Commission website or to update it when they adopt the regulation. I think that the second option will be the most likely one. But in the next week, I guess also the Commission wants to go on holiday. And usually when close to holidays, we all become a bit more efficient. So I will expect the Commission to publish the documents by the next week. I'm optimistic by nature. That's my characteristic. But yeah, I hope we don't have to read through documents on the 30th or 31st of December.
Definitely. Max, could you help me with the next questions? What are the most voted and popular ones?
Yes, of course. The farmers don't storm our office in the meantime, because I'm sorry if there's background noises. They're barricading the street right now with tractors. So it's quite interesting here for those that are in Brussels. But let me quickly sort the questions. We still have a few questions actually relating to timelines and also transits. And by the way, just a quick note to everyone whose questions will not be answered by the time we reach the end of this webinar. So we have taken note of them and we will be discussing them internally as well, and either get back to them in writing or address you directly, depending on what's needed. But let me pick a few. Yes, Tomasz, go ahead.
Yeah, related to the one on the comment section, to transit one specific to Bulgaria. For example, we take the example of from Turkey via Bulgaria to Serbia electricity trade. We definitely, when it comes to implementation, we will see major problems because the TSO in Bulgaria, will they be categorized as a transit or not? And if we will be able to respect this 1 hour is still a question mark, and to what extent we can practically show this was a transit is a problematic one, and this needs to be answered as well. So I definitely agree with this comment, for example, or similar in the Hungary case as well. And we still will need some more practical guidance how this will be made. So this is why we may see more slight adjustments coming through.
Thank you for your contribution, Tomasz. Yeah, I'm sorry for the wait and more questions as well. We've got quite a few. Let's see. I believe everyone can, just a quick question to the audience as well, seeing as some of our experts answered the questions in the comments themselves, is everyone actually able to see these, or shall we address them verbally as well? And if you could just make a upvote reaction or leave a message in chat, that would be nice. We have one right here that's interesting for Lucian. So in case of explicit capacity, Lucian, is the TSO declaring the import towards customs, or does the importer need to declare?
Yeah, it's a good question, and again, it boils back down to the same problems. The practice is completely different between the TSOs. I believe the example I gave in the answer is that some TSOs do that. Yes, some TSOs take all transit flows and they present them to the customs authority, and they solve the transit question there directly, TSO to customs authority. That works. It's okay. It's a small TSO. It's TSO in Moldova, but this is their approach. Other TSOs don't have this approach, and that's why we have problems. And unfortunately, and this is also in one of the questions that we've had, if we expect anything from the EU, from the Commission, from the EU legislator to try to bridge this gap and to solve these issues, which are major, and they affect the functioning of how the electricity market works, and they're at the root of the electricity markets, and this root problem has not been resolved. And unfortunately, at least from the time we had since yesterday to go through this massive package of 20-something documents that the EU has dropped on us for CBAM, I have not seen anything addressing the issue of TSO reports and customs clarification specifically, or mentioning how should transit be dealt with in relation to CBAM for electricity. So unfortunately, this is one of the problems that will be passed on to 2026. And it's a big one. It's one of the biggest questions to which we don't have an answer. And we can only hope that the EU will actually pick up the baton and fix this, because it's in their power to clarify this, especially considering the customs element, where we have the unified customs code and more or less some uniformity between the EU member states. In terms of electricity and TSO practice, not so much. So it's not so far to expect the EU to step in and to clarify these things. But so far, at least I have not seen anything. Maybe Federica, if you have seen anything on this, it would be nice to hear, but I haven't in the time I've had.
I'm asking now, trying to get information from the Commission, but for the moment, radio silence. Now, maybe two additional things. Let's remind ourselves that CBAM have the sort of ambition to apply European law to non-EU countries. Also, what is required in the regulation is required to non-EU TSOs. So this is maybe one of the criticalities of CBAM. Then the second thing is about this big dilemma between physical and commercial. We all know that. So in the current state, still in its current state, the CBAM make a mix between the two of them, because what you have is you have to report, at least for the actual values, the electricity that is injected into the grid from a specific power plant, and that's physical. While when you arrive to the border, it's about commercial. It's not about physical anymore. It's a bit of a management of risk in terms of, because you have to sort of make sure that what you inject into the grid is higher than the capacity that you nominate. But as you can see, that this is a bit the discussion I can see in the comments, like this uncertainty. Okay, a comment, for example, from Frankova, and the fact, okay, what if we have all solar entering from Greece, and in theory this is a transit, like from a physical point of view, but from a commercial point of view, you will need to have a PPA to demonstrate that. So it's a bit of a blur between physical and commercial, and this, I believe, the source of all problem for CBAM application to electricity. There's been not a clear that this is the first problem. And the second problem is the non-harmonization with the custom procedures, which are different. So custom procedures will need to be changed so that they match with CBAM, and not vice versa, because otherwise you're gonna have problem, and you cannot do the opposite. So this is a bit the challenge. CBAM is on hourly level, custom on monthly level, and customs relied on TSO reports, and CBAM also on TSO data, but that are market participant data, but confirmed by TSOs. So it's blurry. Though this is a bit how I would summarize the situation and the current uncertainty that everyone has around CBAM.
Federico, could I ask you to speculate a bit when the proposed amendment will be adopted?
Look, if you refer to Commission adoption, the Commission adoption is coming in the Q4 2025. That's the adoption of the Commission. If you refer to the approval after all the procedures, I mentioned at the beginning that the average is around 15-16 months. That's what I expect the approval to take place. In extraordinary cases, it can be much quicker. But based on statistical data, I will say 15 months, so by June 2027, sorry.
I hope that satisfies everyone who was waiting for an answer for that one. Lucian, can I shift
We'll
the
have
attention
to
to you
meet again next Christmas.
Clearly.
Next Christmas, we'll have to have this webinar again in expectation of the changes expected for 1st of January 2027. This is meant to be a joke, but unfortunately, it's not really funny that all of this is unfolding as it is. But we're working with what we have, and unfortunately, we don't have all that much. As we can see, there's still a lot of questions flowing.
And on that note, Lucian, could I ask you to provide an example in relation to transit that reaches the criteria necessary for the non-application of CBAM? You answered this question in the comments, but just for all those that cannot see the comments, it might be good to go over the example again.
I did, and this is, again, it's just speculation. I have no certainties on this because CBAM is not enforced. But knowing how, for instance, the Romanian TSO works, and again, I'm speaking, like Commissioner I'm speaking from the country I know best, which is Romania. And the reports prepared by Transelectrica are actually really clear and very nice, differentiating between transit flows and imports or exports. So that should be very easy to take this document and bring it to the customs authorities, put it in the CBAM registry when the time will come, and prove that those were actually not imports into the EU. Of course, it depends where you take the electricity, because if you take it from Turkey through Bulgaria and Romania to Hungary, you still have to pay CBAM because it stays in the EU. But if you transit from Serbia to Ukraine, for instance, via Romania, then it should be possible to obtain this exemption. And I'm taking the easy example because Romania is one country, one TSO. But it gets more complicated if you look at Balkans, and this is what Federico was mentioning with the complicated aspects there, where those TSOs, even though they're NSOE, they're technically not part of the EU because the countries are not part of the EU, and these TSOs, and you have several of them, would need to follow suit and apply a similar procedure in order to allow for EU to EU transits via non-EU countries. And this is a difficult question to which there is no clear answer. But to answer your question, I think that could be an example, transit through Romania. It's also one of the few examples that I can think of. And it should work. Based on the TSO report, which I know how it looks, it should work okay.
Thank you, Lucian. We have another very interesting one, actually, that I'd like to ask to Kutalmish. Kutalmish, what if a company has its own renewable energy production in a non-EU country? What is needed to prove that these imports of these volumes into the EU?
Thank you, Max. I think this question should be related to if intra-group PPAs are possible or not. So obviously you need to rely on the actual embedded emissions for your renewable production. You need to conduct a PPA as a producer and also the buyer on the importer on the EU side. And this PPA can easily foresee the relevant amounts. But currently looking at the current legislation, we don't see any restrictions relating to intra-group PPAs. It's not foreseeable at the moment. And if on the one side you are acting like a CBAM authorized declarant, on the other side you are simply an exporter. So there is any problem that we see currently looking at the recent version of the legislative proposal.
Thanks for that answer, Kutalmish. I hope that clarifies the questions. Let's see. Insa, what do you think? A few more as final Christmas gifts, and then we send you all off into the holiday season?
Maybe just one more for our expert, and I think we are well over the time. It's more than 90 minutes, and we have 100 of participants. And thanks a lot for all of us, for all of you, staying with us on this pre-Christmas day. So yeah, let's take probably one more, but let me assure everyone, because we just physically will not be able to cover all the questions, but we will definitely, and our experts will will work on them. We collect all the questions, because this is extremely important, not only for you, but this is important for us to know what market is thinking about and what problems are actually bothering you. So we will be able to provide our replies to you in any case. So which one we take? Max, experts, which one you like, the final one? Which one has not been replied?
I'm trying to pick an older one that we received at the beginning.
I think that the one, I think that the one voted was about UK. So maybe Lucian could take that one. For regarding the UK specifically, was there any indication of a potential delay in the implementation, particularly in relation to the ongoing discussions about a possible linkage between the UK and EU ETS systems?
This is a very good question, and actually the discussion about CBAM for electricity and UK has been a slow-moving car crash, which we have seen throughout 2025, because the discussion about EU and UK ETS linkage has started, I believe, in spring of this year. And it was high on the agenda at this EU-UK summit that the linkage will be done. But then for many months, we haven't heard anything anymore. So clearly there is no linkage, and it will not be done in due time for the 1st of January 2026 when CBAM will kick in. And from the EU perspective, there is also no exemption for the UK of any sort. So I don't know if I should say unfortunately, but it will go ahead as planned, of course, with the caveat that for the UK, the price paid, carbon price paid in the UK will be deducted from the CBAM levy that has to be paid.
Thank you. And I think we have a raised hand from Eberhard. Sorry if my pronunciation is not correct, please.
It's wonderful. Hello, Insa. This is Eberhard.
Hello.
Lucian, just to follow up on this. So you're fundamentally saying, so no exemption, but commercially, it doesn't impact the UK exporter, because as Federico said, you will be able to deduce whatever you paid in the UK.
Well, CBAM is, of course, only applied to the importer. The importer has the burden of proof and has to do the payment. And of course, they will want to subtract whatever was paid in the UK in order not to pay the full amount, because that would not be good business. So CBAM, by definition, is only applicable to the importers. From the perspective of the UK producer or exporter, I believe they don't really have much worry in this respect.
Thank you for the question, Eberhard.
Thank you.
Insa, go ahead.
Yes, shall we stop here? I mean, of course, the topic is very appealing and very interesting to all of us, and also to the market participants and also to experts. A lot of work for us still to do, to go through all the proposals and to think how this will affect the market. So any closing remarks from Jan, from the experts?
No, I think it is clear that we will get further precisions over the next couple of days. I also expect the Commission to perform before year end. So that's what Federico said is what is to be expected. And obviously there is no PPA compliant contractual template. It doesn't exist. So this is something that will only maybe emerge once all the, let's say, specifics of the PPA treatment will become apparent. What can be said certainly is already that probably the use of the PPA during this year has already taken damage simply because of the uncertainties that have been created on the financial impact of CBAM that has certainly already, let's say, had a negative impact on the use of these PPAs this year. And it is clear that this was not the intention of the EU Commission.
Max, please.
Yeah, just a quick question. There seems to be one very burning question. Sorry, Alexander, maybe if you'd like to reshare that one, we can do like a little Christmas miracle and answer one more before we wrap up. So please feel free to write it again or raise your hand and we'll unmute you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks. So basically, I have several of them, but let's probably then focus on the one with regard to identification of the importers. I have met like ambiguity because explanations from European Commission trainings for the custom authorities tells that the identification must be done once in the country of the registration. And what I am seeing from the text of the CBAM and also from the clarifications from some of the advisors is that it shall be done in each country where the import is done. And therefore, there is like uncertainty where to be identified in each country separately where the import is done or only once in one country where you are registered, and whether this requirement applies also directly to the non-residents who are doing the import, or this applies to the indirect customer representative of those non-residents, because I cannot see the same approach that the non-residents do not have to pass the same procedures as EU residents for the purposes of the identification. I can see it only for the purposes of registration as authorized CBAM declarant.
Experts, which one of you would like to take this one?
Maybe if I may, the fact whether you are resident or not resident is unlikely to be relevant. The main thing is that you are importing this electricity in the country. So where the delivery point is, then you are the one that needs to be declaring whether you're resident in this place or not. So this is, again, some of the guidance that we're expecting can be confirmed and coming out in the very near future. I don't know whether anyone else has something to add, Lucian?
Yes, just on the general customs aspects, you of course need to, so if you import electricity into the EU, say in Romania from Ukraine, let's just take a hypothetical example. If you perform this, of course, then you need to perform the customs declarations in Romania. So that's step one that you need to do, and you needed to do before anyway. So with the CBAM, it will all have to be connected and in sync with these as well, because it will not be possible that CBAM registry entries and declarations are conflicting with customs import papers. That will not be allowed.
I'm not sure whether you speak about the same. So I'm not speaking about the registration for purposes of the customs procedures. I'm specifically articulating the identification of electricity importers. So whether, according to my understanding, if you're importing cement, you need to register as authorized CBAM declarant, and you need to be registered directly. That's your obligation. If you are importing electricity, you have the authorized authority has an obligation to register you and to pass the identification procedure, for which the importer needs to submit certain documents to the authorized authority. And the question mark, do I need to do it in each country? According to what I have heard from Jan, I suppose yes. And again, non-resident also then shall pass the same procedures as EU residents. So that's the position.
Yes, I think you are that is the position, Alexander. Yes.
I think I agree with your interpretation, Alexander.
Yeah, thanks. Just for letting you know, practical experience in Croatia is that we were told by the custom authorities who were on the trainings with EU Commission, they were instructed that the importers need to be registered only in one country. No, yeah, directly, in my opinion, is contradicting what is told in the CBAM regulation, but yeah.
You know, there is a lot of, you know, as many people you ask, as many questions as many answers you get. And there's also modifications, or at least in the future will be in terms of customs legislation, which may at some point allow this, but not at this point, not with what we have at the moment. So what you mentioned would be the default option, as you understand it as well, not as the Croatian regulator understands it.
Thanks.
I think, yeah, we have one more raised hand. Paulina, please.
Yes, thank you very much for letting me pitching in. I just have a question related to what Alexander was saying, and my question is regarding the deadline for applying for the status of authorized CBAM declarant, because I heard it was postponed, and I would just like to know if you know what is the deadline for submitting the application for authorization.
I'll take this one as well. And Federico, correct me if I'm wrong, but for electricity, the rules are somewhat different as for the other commodities. So you don't have to register beforehand. It says in the implementing regulation that was published back in March, and it's also in the CBAM regulation itself, that you are regarded as authorized declarant without the need to submit an application. Why? Because you simply can't run away from this. It's all in the TSO reports that you performed imports into the EU, and this will be performed automatically. There's no need to register. As for the other commodities which arrive in a harbor by ship at the border, and then you need to prepare this process. For electricity, it's much more transparent because it's all, of course, on the NSOE websites and also in the TSO reports. So for electricity, it's only paperwork. So that's my understanding. Maybe Federico, if I missed something or if I misrepresented something.
No, it's correct. Absolutely correct what you said. I think this is more a question for someone that is importing aluminium or steel or any other of these commodities, not for electricity.
Thank you so much.
The problem with CBAM is that the news on CBAM is mixed. You know, you get news on CBAM that is relevant for the other commodities, and then you have CBAM for electricity, and the news is mixed. You don't have a clear separation in the news between the news for CBAM that doesn't apply to electricity, which is the other commodities, and whatever is relevant to electricity, and that can create confusion. And unfortunately, that's because by design, electricity is included in CBAM as if it were cement, which it is not. And as Federico was saying, it would be nice to have a time machine to go back and maybe raise all these issues even more strongly, even earlier. But unfortunately, we don't, so we have to work with what we have.
Exactly. So let me thank again to our experts first and to our audience who stayed with us for such a long time. And we do appreciate that, and we do appreciate your trust in our expertise. And we will be happy to reply to your questions. So, I mean, some of the questions indeed have not been covered just because of lack of time and because the topic is such an extensive one. So please feel free. So we will collect them from the chat, of course, and from Q&A session. But if something is really important for you and has not been covered yet, please feel free to contact us through social media, through email. I mean, we are open to any types of discussions, of communication with you, and our experts will help you to the extent possible. At least if something is not clear, at least we will work on this together with you. So thanks a lot. I wish everyone happy holiday period, happy holidays if someone is actually starting their holidays tomorrow or maybe next week. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. I hope that all the CBAM regulations will be implemented smoothly in our daily routine and in our business, and I hope that 2026 will bring more responses and replies rather than questions.